Dr. Sandeep Chawla, who is from the UNODC, Director of Policy Analysis and Public Affairs, and he's going to give us an overview of illicit drug production, trafficking and abuse trends, which I shall find incredibly interesting. And he's drawing, of course, on UNODC research.
Thank you, Baroness Meacher. Thank you for inviting me this afternoon. I'm delighted to speak to this subject. There's a PowerPoint presentation which is up over there, but I'll put it up for reference, but I'm not going to rely too much on it since the figures fall out of my ears. But at least you'll have it graphically illustrated before you as we go through. The purpose that drugs are controlled is to have these drugs available for medical and scientific uses and not for recreational ones. They are vital medicines, they are very important for public health, and that's why a control system was developed. The purpose of the system, the first principle of it, was always, and still is, the protection of public health. Unfortunately, in the implementation, this got forgotten. And what happened in the implementation of this control system was that measures to control the supply of the drugs got emphasized, and the public health principles of the system were underemphasized and neglected. Even today in the world, the first principle of drug control, public health, is long on rhetoric and short on resources. Long on public statements in favor of it, very short on priority and attention. And you need to put this into the perspective of how many people are actually using the drugs. Now, I think I'm not going to bother with the details of this. Let me give you the big picture just in terms of data and figures. If you take numbers of people using drugs, the controlled illicit drugs, on an annual prevalence basis, meaning having used at least once in the last year, the number today is approximately 215 million people. Okay, this is actually expressed in a range, since we don't have spot-on estimates for this, and the range is 170 to 300, but a round figure is 250 million people. This has not changed much in the last 8 or 10 years. It's been in the region of 200 to 250 million people. In terms of a proportion of the population, this is roughly 5% of the adult population of the world. So, roughly 5% of the adult population, about 250 million people, are using illicit drugs. Of this 250 million, the overwhelming amount is users of cannabis. If you take cannabis out, the figure drops drastically to a very, very small number indeed. So of the 5%, 3% is cannabis, 2% is the other drugs. Now, annual prevalence is not necessarily a very good measure of problem drug use. Problem drug use is measured in terms of dependency, addiction, injecting drug use, serious health problems tied to the drugs themselves, and those numbers are even more revealing, because what we are talking about there is approximately 27 million people in the world. 27 million people, again, it's normally expressed as a range between 20 and 50 million, but 27 million people in the world are problem drug users. In terms of a percentage of the adult population of the world, this is 0.6%. So 0.6% of the adult population of the world has a problem with drugs. 5% of the adult population of the world uses illicit drugs, though not necessarily with problems associated with it. This is the magnitude of what we are talking about. And to take this further, how do you get a sense of what these numbers mean? What is 5% of the adult population of the world? What does it represent? It represents 250 million people, I told you. What does that represent? What do we compare this with to get an idea of the magnitude of the problems we are talking about? Well, the most obvious and simple comparison is to compare this with other psychoactive drugs that are used by humanity at large. And the two most popular ones also happen to be legal ones, which is tobacco and alcohol. Now, tobacco is probably as addictive as a lot of our illicit drugs. Alcohol may not be, but it is certainly as psychoactive. And it's only by historical accident that these drugs are legal, whereas the ones we control are illegal. And it's a historical process that can actually be explained. So it's a euphemism to call it an accident, but for want of political correctness, I'll stick with that. Now, if you compare the numbers, well, then you can get some sort of an idea of what illicit drugs represent, because if you take annual prevalence numbers, the ones I gave you, 5% of the adult population of the world using illegal drugs. On the same measure of annual prevalence, tobacco is consumed by 22% of the adult population of the world. And tobacco, you will realize, is usually something where annual prevalence is not a good estimate for a habitual smoker. So when you're saying 22%, you mean 22% are probably habitual smokers. With alcohol, the measures are even more telling, though difficult to compare, because 55% of the adult population of the world uses alcohol, again on an annual prevalence basis. It doesn't mean they have problems with alcohol. We don't have authoritative good numbers for the prevalence of alcoholism in the world, but 55% are users of alcohol on an annual prevalence basis. So 5% for illicit drugs, 22% for tobacco, 55% for alcohol. And now you look at the health effects of the use of these substances. We have pretty solid, stable numbers for the number of people who die from drug-related causes, usually drug overdose of one kind or another, worldwide. And that number is approximately 210,000 people per year. So 210,000 people are dying every year from drug-related causes, illicit drug-related causes. This is, again, a very small proportion of the numbers of people that die from tobacco and alcohol use. Alcohol claims approximately 2.3 million lives a year. So 2 million as a round figure. Tobacco claims 5 million lives a year. So 200,000 for illicit drugs, 2 million for alcohol, 5 million for tobacco. These are a good way of putting this whole problem into perspective. When we talk about this big control system and all of its effects, what magnitude of problem are we talking about in terms of the number of users and the effects upon them? Well, I submit that it's very small indeed, particularly when you compare with alcohol and tobacco. this brings one to the larger question of what Madame Dreyfus said at the beginning, a term that she used, or I can't remember whether it was Baroness Meacher, the unintended consequences of the control system. Those words are very familiar to us in the United Nations Office in Drugs and Crime, because while we didn't originate the expression, expressions in English have very old and longer origins. We are certainly the first ones that brought it into the discourse on drugs. And the idea of this was to try and look at what was happening when the control system, which was put there to protect public health, was actually implemented in different ways by different countries. But there was one overwhelming characteristic to the way in which this system was implemented, and that was that it relied on supply side measures, on control measures, on punitive action, on law enforcement, and ignored or let fly or fall by default the public health measures that were needed for this. Now, this whole picture needs to be then put into contrast of what are the big trends we are seeing. One big one I've told you, if you look at the last 5 or 7 years, what's happening with the main categories of the drugs that we control, there is probably a lot of good news in some areas and bad news in others. It's always a mix because there's never a clear picture. Since over the last 10 years, as I said, the one good sign of all this is that the number of people using has generally remained stable. It's not going up, not drastically, and certainly not going up anywhere near the rate of population increase. So, just by virtue of population increase, the numbers should have gone up, they haven't. Secondly, we do have a problem with the prevalence of probably the most dangerous group of substances among the illicit drugs that are controlled, the opiates or the opioids. The opioids is a term we use to add in synthetic opiates that originally started life as prescription medicines. These have increased a lot, not necessarily in the mature stable markets, but in Asia and Africa. So the numbers are going up. We've got increases in cannabis, again in Asia and Africa, but we have consistent and observable declines in the number of users of cocaine, of the amphetamine type stimulants, and of ecstasy. In fact, to give you one example, what used to be the biggest cocaine market in the world, which was the United States, in the last 6 or 7 years, that market has shrunk by 40%. Now, if you look beyond this at figures of cultivation of the drugs and of seizures of the drugs, it draws something of a similar picture that I'm trying to paint over here. You have great increases in the number of amphetamine type stimulants seized in the world, but you also have evidence that the cocaine market appears to be coming under some form of control or containment because it's going down. With opium and the cultivation of opium, there's a problem because the two traditional areas of opium production are both going up, Afghanistan and Southeast Asia. We thought we had it under control in Southeast Asia, particularly in Myanmar, but it's been increasing there in the last few years. We are now talking today of approximately 250,000 hectares that are under opium cultivation. And if you'd like to have a figure for this, then this translates roughly into about 5,000 tons of opium which on very raw estimates is 500 tons of heroin. This year, we expect this to go up. Last year, cultivation in Afghanistan was very high, but it was the hand of God, not human intervention, that kept production low because there was a disease that blighted the poppy plant. But this year, there's no disease, so it's probably going to go up. Production in Myanmar is also increasing, so with the opiates, we've got a problem. When you add to this a spreading epidemic of the use of prescription opiates, synthetic opiates, what we together call opioids, then this becomes a serious problem all over the world. Seizures of these drugs are concentrated pretty much around the two big production centers, Afghanistan and Southeast Asia, around Myanmar. But the use is spread all over, and as I said earlier, some of the mature markets are showing stability, like Europe. In fact, Europe, there's a decline, but some of the new markets in Asia and Africa are increasing very considerably. Cocaine production is a different story. There's more signs of tractability in that market. It's been brought under control. Cocaine production today, cocaine is cultivated on about 155,000 hectares, chiefly in the three countries, Colombia, Bolivia, Peru. Colombia is going down, Peru and Bolivia have been going up. 15 years ago, we were talking about 200,000 hectares. Now we are down to 150,000 hectares. The American market has shrunk. A big change happened in the cocaine market because where earlier the market was primarily a market in the United States, now Europe is as big a market as the United States. And today we have cocaine production in the region from these 155,000 hectares, something between 800 and 1,000 tons of cocaine per year. It varies. We express these in ranges because the figures are not definite. Most of the seizures of cocaine take place in North America. With cannabis, we have a different kind of a problem. One is the fact that the use of cannabis, particularly in its herbal form, what we commonly call marijuana, is very widespread all across the world. The use of the other form of cannabis, hashish or cannabis resin, appears to be declining. With cannabis, the difficulty is it's produced everywhere, seized everywhere, and now there is more and more hydroponic cultivation of it in the industrialized or developed countries of the world, which tends to make the problem a lot bigger. The seizures of amphetamine-type stimulants are going up. The only two places where they are not large at the moment are Africa and South America, but everywhere else in the world, they are very large indeed. Our new challenge is now what we call the new psychoactive substances, which are putting the system under a severe set of challenges that we need to deal with. Now, before I end this, I'd like to say one more word about the unintended consequences and what all this data is pointing towards. It seems to me quite clear that the challenges that these drug conventions face at the moment and the control system faces at the moment is chiefly to do with dealing with the unintended consequences. And speaking of the conventions, the problem has always been in the way that they are implemented, not in the way that they are written and not in what they contain. There is not one single word in any of the three conventions that obliges a country to put a user of drugs in jail. The way it's interpreted is different. There is not one single word. And there is wording in these conventions which allow for the fact that treatment can be an alternative to conviction and punishment. How this has been used is quite a different matter. It's quite a different matter because of the focus that I said that has been put traditionally on the supply side. And this discussion and debate that is happening now, as well as this special session of the General Assembly that's coming in 2016, may be the perfect opportunity to try and get this system to move out of the rigidities that it's dealt with, tackle the unintended consequences, tackle the violence, tackle all the attendant costs of implementing this system, and bring the drug control system back to what it was originally intended for, to protect the health of the population, and to deal with two specific issues here is bring it back to something that is in accordance with human rights rather than violating human rights, and takes the violence out of the drug trade, because clearly the trafficking is creating problems of violence all over. And if I may end with paraphrasing Shakespeare as far as the conventions are concerned, I come here not to bury Caesar, the conventions, but actually to praise them, because there's enough in there to keep the system going. It's all to do with the way we implement it. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much indeed, Dr. Chawla.